Hello, welcome to the screencast entitled Son of the Gods. Now, this is when Alexander moves through the ancient lands of Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Egypt, and ultimately this happens in the year 332 BC to 331 BC. Now, the focus of this particular screencast is on some letters that were exchanged between Alexander and Darius, and our main source for the letters is Arrian. In terms of where we are on our map, here we are here. Alexander's had his great victory at Issus over Darius, and now he's moving down the coast of the eastern Mediterranean, as I said, through those ancient, and the biblical lands of Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and then ultimately here into Egypt. Now, Darius chose to write a letter to Alexander, and I think just that itself is really interesting, because it wasn't that long ago that when Alexander crossed the Hellespont, that Darius thought he was a man of no consequence, and Darius was convinced that Memnon and the local warlords in Asia Minor would crush Alexander at Granicus. And when that proved to be false, and then Darius was forced essentially to take the battlefield at Issus, where he was defeated by Alexander, as you know. So he's almost made a complete U-turn, really, in his viewpoint of Alexander. And now he believes Alexander is worthy of opening up lines of communication with him, which is really interesting because he made the first move here. So I think he is now really, really seeing Alexander as a clear threat. So the contents of the letter that was written by Darius to Alexander, look, I've just summarized what I think are the main points. And the first point that Darius makes is, I fought you, Alexander, to defend my country. You are the invader. That's true. Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And so Darius straight away has taken up the moral high ground here, that I was defending my lands against you, the invader. So he takes the moral high ground, which metaphorically puts Alexander on the lower ground as being the invader. Similar to, close to Gallipoli, similar as the New Zealanders were the invaders in the World War I when they invaded Turkey, the Battle of Gallipoli. The Turks had the moral high ground because they were defending their country. It's the same here. Darius has claims of moral high ground because he was defending his country. And then second point, he says, you have my family. I would like them to be returned to me. Fair point. Who wouldn't? And then he starts firing a few warning shots across Alexander's bows, so to speak. It was the gods who decided the outcome of the Battle of Issus, not you. It was the gods. Yeah, that's interesting. Not you, Alexander. I mean, that's interesting. It sort of removes the responsibility from Darius, doesn't it? And also takes away any glory from Alexander. And then he warns Alexander, says, there are many rivers in your way, which is a fair point. Like, Alexander has won the battle here, but he has not won the war. There are many rivers for him to cross if he's going to even contemplate defeating the whole Persian Empire. And so Alexander, and we know his personality, we know the way that he thinks, and I like his reply. And again, this is according to Arrian. So Alexander replies, and he rebuts each point of Darius, basically. So Darius said, I fought you to defend my country. Alexander shoots back, I was invading you as revenge for when your people invaded my country. And he's referring back to the Persian Wars, as we know. And so Alexander is saying, this is a war of revenge. Your ancestors invaded my lands, and you destroyed many of the sacred shrines and killed many thousands of my people. So I am attacking you for revenge. So that moral high ground that Darius put himself on has kind of been leveled out somewhat. And then Alexander throws another accusation at him, which is interesting insight into what he's thinking. He says, you paid assassins to murder my father. Oh, well, okay. Where'd this idea come from? It must have been floating around there in the background that Darius had some culpability in the assassination of Philip by Pausanias. What most scholars seem to think is that the reason Alexander brought this up is perhaps he is still feeling a little bit guilty about the death of Philip. Perhaps, was he involved some way, or did he know what was happening and chose not to take any part of it? It seems like sort of the idea he's protesting too much. He brings this up at this time again. He does it later in Egypt as well. And it's an interesting sort of point here. It would suggest that there are still many unanswered questions about Philip's death. and that rumours are still being spread around, and quite possibly rumours that include Alexander's involvement. So this is a good way of highlighting, no, Darius, it was you who paid money for the assassins to kill my father. Whether it's true or not, we've got no evidence, but it shows, I think, that Alexander is a bit worried about that prospect, and that the questions are still being asked about Philip's assassination. Alexander then says, it wasn't the gods, I defeated you in battle. I did this. Me, Alexander, I am the unstoppable one. You turned and fled. And I think that's just quite a good point. And then he says, I love this one, don't try to scare me with rivers. I am here to conquer your lands. Someone who's crossed the Granicus is not going to be concerned about rivers in my way. And then Alexander, always being well endowed with the quip, so to speak, says, you want your family back? They're yours. Just come and ask for them, and I will give them to you. And that's really cool. Of course you can have your family back. Just come and ask, and I'll return them to you. And so straight away, Darius is never going to do that, because that would mean Darius is essentially coming on bended knee, asking, the conqueror for his family back. You can have your family back, no problem. Just come and ask. I do love how Alexander does things sometimes. Now, Arrian kind of actually leaves the story there, but Curtius picks it up. He says, well, there was a further exchanges of letters, which I think is really interesting. And what Darius does, according to Curtius, is completely changes tack. He offers a huge amount of wealth to Alexander. So he says, I would really like my family back. Please return my daughters, my children, my wife, and my mother. I would like them back. And what is more, you can take my eldest daughter as your wife. You can have her as your wife. This is huge. This is huge. So Darius is proposing, according to Curtius, essentially an alliance between himself and Alexander, where they will become family. So Darius has taken a huge step down from, I don't even know this Alexander is, heavy squash, to actually, let's come together and create an alliance. Have my daughter. Crazy. It's really interesting. And then he says, those lands behind you that you've conquered, all of Asia Minor, you keep them. They're yours. I give you my daughter. I give you all those lands. They're yours. And what's more, I'm going to give you a lot of wealth. I'm going to give you 30,000 talents. Now, 3 talents would make one extremely wealthy. I'm talking like a millionaire today. 30,000, mind-boggling. And he formally says it. Sorry if my head's obscuring this, but he formally says, let's create an alliance. You rule that part of the empire that you've conquered. I will rule the rest. We will be together and united. We'll be family because you're going to marry my daughter. This is a great story that Darius is now doing this, offering all this to Alexander. Now, by any accounts, this is a good deal, right? Alexander's going to get so much out of this. He's going to get a new wife, that's great. He's going to have an alliance with the great king of Persia, the lord of the world. He's going to become incredibly rich, even richer than he already is. And no more men need to die, So this is a good deal by any stretch of the imagination. And essentially, he's forced Darius to come to this. So, he's in a sense, he's won. So, will Alexander accept? Well, that is the question, isn't it? Now, Parmenio steps forward, and this, to me, this is beautiful. Alexander does here. Parmenio steps forward, and according to Curtius, he again offers advice, just like he did at Granicus. Remember, Parmenio said, "Wait until dawn, Alexander," and he steps up and he says to Alexander, "If I were you, Alexander, I would accept this offer." And then you remember how Alexander was so quick with the quip when Philip tumbled from one couch to the other. This is the man who'll take you from Greece into Persia, and he can't even cross from one couch to the other. Alexander, brilliant with his one-line reply. So just go, Parmenio said, look, if I were you, Alexander, I would take this offer. And Alexander says, and if I were you, Parmenio, so would I. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's there's a real tension, I think, here between Alexander and Parmenio. So that is just a great slap down. And so Alexander, according to Curtius, he replies to Darius, And Alexander's brilliant in this, you know. I mean, yeah, I think he's wonderful. Um, says, there will be no alliance between us. I came here to conquer you. There's going to be no alliance. And Darius had actually thanked Alexander for looking after his family. And he said, don't thank me for looking after your family. I don't make war on women and children. That's not strictly true, because he's responsible for the death of many thousands of them. But this is what he says here. Don't thank me. Don't thank me for looking after them. I don't make war on women and children. And then, those lands you offer me, these lands behind me, I've already taken them from you. They're not yours to offer me any longer. They're mine. So that's brilliant, eh? And then he says, once more, you want your family back? Come and ask for them, and they're yours. They're perfectly safe. They're unharmed. They're yours when you come and ask. And what's more, Darius, if you don't, it is war that will decide the future between us. Bang, sit down, done. Mic drop, just brilliant. And Darius doesn't write back. I love the way Alexander does things, really. So Darius realizes now that there's no chance of sort of negotiating with this Greek king. He needs to put other plans into action. And what Darius does is right. He picks up Memnon's plan. We need to invade Greece, and he orders his generals to make an alliance with the king of Sparta. You remember the Spartans never joined Alexander's invasion force because they would not be led by anyone else other than the Spartan. So they were sort of sitting here. Perhaps I guess Darius saw them as being, the ideal agents of a revolution against Macedonian control, backed by the Persians. And so they made alliances with Sparta, with King Agis was his name, Agis, to start a rebellion in Greece and to take on the Macedonians and bring the war to Alexander's backyard, so to speak, and thus cut Alexander off from his support lines. And the Spartans did. The Spartans in the Battle of Thermopylae, obviously, were they very heroic and making that last-ditch stand. Well, these are the Spartans who sided with the Persians now. Okay, this is what the Greeks are like. And so the Spartans did, and they did stage a rebellion against Macedonian control, and it was absolutely crushed by the Macedonians. Because remember, Alexander left Antipater in Macedonia as regent with an army of 25,000 highly trained Macedonian warriors. And when the Spartans led this rebellion, no other states joined them. Like, oh, no, God, no, we're not going to fight the Macedonians. And the Spartans were roundly defeated in battle when they tried to rebel against Alexander at the behest of Darius. And when Alexander heard about this, and another one of his little quips, he heard about this rebellion, and he said, sounds like a war of mice. And that's Alexander. Very disparaging, very sort of whatever. Good luck to them. And so, look, that's what happens. That's our letters in the invasion of Greece as Alexander moves down the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, and it gives us an insight into Alexander's thinking and Darius's thinking at this stage, I believe. And coming up next is the Siege of Tyre. Now, this is one of the most incredible undertakings Alexander does, an amazing achievement. And that's for another story for another time. Okay, thanks very much. Kia kite.